Hey, welcome back. Welcome to another episode of Ecosystem Aces. I'm Chip Rodgers, CMO at WorkSpan, and excited today to be talking to Paul Dumke. Paul is a veteran at Intel, many years at Intel, 25 years, I think, right, Paul?
You got it. Yep.
That's amazing. You've had a lot of different roles over that time. I suppose that's true with any large company. I was at SAP for a long time and had a number of different roles that I played as well. And gosh, you're going back to the days of working with Acer and Asus and some of the laptop and desktop providers. But now you're running ecosystems for Senior Director Ecosystem Strategy and Operations at Intel, and gosh, I really want to hear more about what that's all about, and I'm looking forward to our conversation. So, Paul, welcome.
Great. Thanks, Chip. Thanks for inviting me on. Happy to be here and happy to share.
Yeah. So why don't we start there? Tell us a little bit about what you and your team are up to at Intel, and what does this mean? Ecosystem strategy and operations.
Sure. Yeah, happy to. Yeah. So our team is kind of newly formed, and it's really just born out of what happened during the chip shortages a couple of years ago, and kind of this acknowledgement that we had a little bit of a gap, and we didn't realize it until we were in the throes of everything. And that came from just making sure that we had a good partnership with our component vendors who are on our platforms. So from that kind of bore other things that we saw that we could be doing better as a company, and that kind of got to my team and what we do, and that's really to enable our ecosystem supply chain to support our growth strategy. So kind of think about it, whereas you have the company supply chain ecosystem, everything they're kind of doing internally, focusing on their supply chain. What I'm looking at is the external side of it, so the ecosystem supply chain or the supply chain of our customers and our partners, and what are some of the challenges that they're facing that we as a company were able to address in what we did internally, how we can take those resources, those strategies, those relationships, and kind of bring them to bear with our customers and partners. Because as we know, during kind of the shortages we all faced, and Intel was not the only one in this, those customers and partners issues, it affected our business and our ability to ship and sell our products. So seeing that now and understanding what we can do is kind of what we've been working on and developing a lot of strategies and tools to address.
That was a really big challenge at the time. So it's interesting that Intel is taking on this this initiative to try and solve it next time. Hopefully, there isn't a next time. But yeah, that's been tough, and I suppose we're all still sort of working our way out of it. But it caused it impacted. Well, we heard about the car market, right, and
Yeah.
other sort of downstream effects. What have you has I'm sure Intel has sort of gone through like a root cause analysis, like what is it that happened, and how will your team sort of try and mitigate those challenges next time?
Yeah, sure. So it kind of starts with the acknowledgement that we're an ingredient company, so we are really dependent upon our partners to bring our products to market, and we've known this for a very, very long time. And the idea of partnership is not new at Intel. We've been doing this for a very long time. We have a lot of work we've done to develop programs on this. The Intel Partner Alliance that's the current name of it. It's a huge program, very well established, that supports partners in various different forms. So it's not like we didn't know to do this. It's kind of like in a big company, you still have scarce resources. So you kind of deploy those resources. And sometimes when there's an issue, then you reevaluate and go, well, where do I have to shift things to? So we kind of saw that issue, and we said, well, we can leverage some of our culture of partnership using our resources over here. And in doing that, what we kind of saw was, well, we had the component partners, the ones that are on our platforms that we've had a very deep engineering relationship with for many, many decades. What we acknowledged was, or found and acknowledged, is we didn't have the depth of a business partnership with them to really say, well, they're producing components like we are. They have some of the same constraints that we had, and they rely on us. So we need to not just enable them from a technology perspective, which we've done for decades, but also from a business perspective. So they're dependent upon us, we're dependent upon them, and understanding that transcends to a business relationship too. On, well, planning wise, what's the product transitions, or even market outlook. Because of our size, we have the ability to be in a lot of different parts of the market categories, and so we have a pretty good sense of what's going on. And so that can be value we add to those partners to say, hey, this is what we're seeing. So there can be third party reports and whatnot. We can take some of our knowledge and bring that to them and help them plan better as a trusted advisor and as a business partner on the platform with us. So it's kind of peeling back the onion, going not high level, that business relationship, and then going, what are some specific areas in that we can really support them using our culture of partnership, using our existing resources, or starting new things and doing new things based on kind of what we hear as their pain point.
Wow, really, that's really interesting. So you're actually helping your ecosystem partners and component providers give them more visibility, more sort of forward-looking into what Intel is seeing and where the roadmap is, the roadmap you have, and sort of helping them do better planning as well.
Yeah, exactly. We have in our partner alliance program, there's a partner journey that all the different category types go through. So this would be system integrators, even software developers. So it's mapping out, what does that journey look like for this type of partner. And again, we know who they are, we work with them, but it's making sure that journey has all the aspects of it. And I go back to what ecosystem, which it's great to have this podcast, because it's drawing attention to the fact that businesses are in ecosystems, or think of it from a biology sense, right? They're symbiotic relationships. So sometimes you don't know how dependent you are on someone until there's an issue, and you go, oh shoot, that affected us. And again, it was not because it was ignored, it just wasn't focused on. So when you have these issues come up, you recognize there is that relationship that's necessary. So then you kind of, in our culture of Intel being engineers, it's problem solution. So we have this problem, what's the solution? So it's going then through that culture of partnership and going, what does that journey look like? Well, we have a lot of pieces today, but what pieces were missing that caused this to happen? And then how do you prevent that in the future? To your point on shortages, there could be, again, demand is going to come back, it's going to continue to grow. Who knows what's going to happen on supply? Who knows what's going to happen with global situations,
right?
External shocks. So the more you can map that out and identify those parts of your journey, not just engineering technical wise, but the business side of it, and then apply some solutions to that. That's kind of what we're on a track to do.
That's amazing, and really interesting, getting into the mechanics of working with partners in that way. Paul, maybe you could talk a little bit about what does that look like? What does that process look like as you're working with partners, putting your roadmap together? You have in a way a shared roadmap of product capabilities and features that are going to be coming, where you want to roll something out to, and we could talk about sort of both sides of it, of like sort of the component pieces that might go into the overall hardware solution, but then also the ISVs as well that are building on top of it, and the capabilities that they need in order to build new software to really roll something out. Maybe you could talk a little bit about sort of those two aspects of things. It gets very complicated very quickly, right? Because as you said, it's an ecosystem. It's not just one company, so you have to sort of be coordinated on all sides.
Yep. Yeah, it starts with it's kind of, you said the word, downstream, upstream, and that's kind of again what's unique for us and other companies probably too, where you're a link in the chain, so you have to look upstream and downstream from you and go, well, what are my key dependencies? So the process is, you have to like you have that acknowledgement, that awareness to be able to look up and down from where you're at in your point, and identify those key dependencies, interdependencies, and say which ones are we going to focus on. At the end of the day, you have scarce resources, and the more you kind of have that awareness, and I've seen it, it just unleashes all this. It's almost like a never-ending kind of chain of, well, there's this and there's this and there's this. At some point, it's hard to affect change the further you are away from your epicenter. So it kind of saying, well, what does success look like here? What's kind of, think of it in terms of product. What's your minimum viable product? So what's going to be the point with which I feel if I've done that 80/20 rule, whatnot, that's probably a good starting point. Then we can kind of go from there.
Mm-hmm.
Because what I've seen is the more you jump in here, like I said, you kind of jump in and you shine a light in all these corners. You go, oh my gosh, there's all these spaces, but I just can't go everywhere. So it's being aware of what are we going to do, what are we not going to do in our process, in this journey I talk about. You're going to find all these things. It's then saying, well, systematically, what are we going to tackle today versus tomorrow versus years down the road? And really comes down to that relationship with the partners and understanding what they need. And I think also as a company saying, well, what can we realistically do and how do we get aligned on that? So it's that, awareness, but then kind of giving yourself that, constraint of I only can do so much, but then making sure what you do is really going to be of value and provide an outcome that's mutually beneficial.
So how do you do that's a lot of coordination. How do you have regular checkpoints and sort of cadence calls with partners? What are those done on a regular, on a like a weekly, monthly basis, quarterly basis? How do you do those? How do you sort of break that down?
Sure. So I'd say, like any good partnership, you have kind of that heartbeat of engagement. So do you have, individuals who are managing those relationships? So again, whether it's partnership or sales or any of that, it's just still, do you have that frequent connection point? Do you have that, both tactical and also strategic kind of relationship with them? So you're having that heartbeat of checking in, following
Mhm.
through on things, but then you also have the right kind of strategic checkpoints with the right individuals and stakeholders, so that based on that kind of your kind of bounding box, so to speak. That may be different based on which partner type. Because again, you can't do everything, so you may vary that based on who you're engaged with. So we definitely try to make sure there is, that disciplined of the heartbeat of a tactical engagement, that frequent thing, but also having the right strategic engagement at the right
Mhm.
points. And it comes down to that upstream, downstream, because it depends on your product life cycle too. In our business, we have many years out we're planning. So it's making sure that those strategic points are being done at the optimal time to make the right decisions and not
Mm,
too late, because then you get in the space of saying, "Hey, thanks for showing up, but you're a little bit late to affect change here."
mm.
So again, it kind of goes back to what's needed, what do they the partner need, and if you're listening and you understand the schedule and what their deliverables are in their timeline, you can sync them with yours, and then say, well, we need to make sure that we have this discussion to line this piece of information, make this decision by this point. So it's really starting with this gigantic thing and kind of trying to just keep it simple at the core. It sounds complex, but if you can kind of keep it simple, keep it confined to that, I think it's very manageable. It's very manageable.
Well, and one of the challenges that you have is, just because of the nature of creating, uh, chips, that it's, I think, like a basically like a 2-year forecast, right? Forecast. I mean, it's from the time that you say, "Okay, well, let's go build something that looks like this," it's a couple of years before you can have it designed, create the fab machine. I mean, build all the infrastructure to be able to produce and test and all those things, it's 2 years. So how do you think, like, you're forecasting way out of a lot different than software, right? It's like, okay, well, let's put it in,
Right.
put it in the next sprint, and then it's out, so how do you think about those challenges, and with that kind of constraint, I guess, of having to look so far out in the future?
Right. And I think that's where we have a benefit of being who we are and the size we are, because we have a really good history of trying to forecast that. Of course, it's well documented some of the challenges we've had, but the core of what we do is still very much a muscle memory we have, which is you have to predict out, as you said, many years in advance, and make that commitment. And we've done that very publicly too with different projects around the world, right? So those are all committed plans. And so when you do that, you're doing that based on some information you have, some assumptions you have. So then it kind of goes back to what I was saying before of, well, as a good partner, if I'm going to be a trusted advisor to my ecosystem, then what of that information, those processes I have, can I then take and bring to them? So if I have some information on market sizing, or if I see trends or technologies or whatnot, taking that information and then saying, well, how do we partner appropriately with that information to support the ecosystem so that they can show up, when we would ideally need them to, and give them what they want, that they could be
Mhm,
successful too.
mhm,
I think that's kind of what we saw during some of the shortages is we didn't have enough of that kind of communication on some of the planning aspects of it to give them not no information, but enough information to make those decisions that are, supporting what we need them to for our platforms. So it's kind of just thinking out over time and saying, well, if it's a demand signal, like I said, or a category thing, or a trend, some of the things that we see because of all the places we are, we can kind of bring that in as a trusted advisor, being the opportune word, and just saying, hey, here's what we're seeing. This is not at all an endorsement that's going to happen. It is purely just this is what we see. This is what it could be. This is what we're
mhm,
thinking. And in many of these conversations, we'll ask the question like, well, what do you think? Because some of the partners too now are servicing more industries given the emergence of semiconductors that are based on the digitization and electrification of systems. So
mhm.
they're in more places. They're in places that maybe we don't have a stronger presence. So there is benefit in coming in with our information, but then asking that question, because then we can get more information too and say, well, that's guy hadn't thought about that. Maybe we can revise something. So it's kind of this iterative process, as well as grabbing nuggets that you have in your long range planning.
Well, and, I mean, who could have predicted, by the way, it was kind of a major shock that we all went through for the last 3 years, that had ripple effects all over, right? So, that kind of thing is pretty hard to predict in 2019 that we that the world would shut down, 6 months from then. So, um,
Right.
so, as you're going through this process, then, working with partners, I love that, you're not only talking about what you're seeing coming, but then you're also getting feedback from the partners because they might be in certain markets that you're, or see some things that, and sort of putting that all into the mix. You make decisions, you start to make investments, your partners are making investments, you're putting these, solutions together. How to talk a little bit about the sort of the going to market then, and how does that work with, between Intel and some of your partners, that, how much are partners involved in that, and how do you sort of operationalize some of that work?
Yeah, so I'd say for the partners we have, it starts with our platform and in understanding, what is this platform, where is it positioned for? It kind of wraps in what we are just talking about, where because we service so many parts of the market, so many categories, there's so many platforms. It kind of starts with, well, what's the positioning of this platform? Kind of typical, segment target positioning and marketing. So the partners obviously, and two, they have different solutions, different products for different segments of the market. So it starts with kind of going back to that we just talked about too, like what is the size of this market? What is the timing of it do you see? Because that will affect some of their go to market with us and saying, well, this is the right solution for that kind of an application. So it goes back to also the engineering relationship, making sure that we're aligned on, kind of that, value offering of the platform, so that we're engaging the right partners and they know how to bring their right solutions to our platform. So when we turn around then and enable them on it and offer it to our customers, our OEMs who then make the
Hmm.
system market, then it's synced up really well so that they're not sitting there guessing, going like, well, why did you choose that? Or why is this enabled? Or I wasn't sure that was the right solution for this market. So that's an iterative process too, where we're engaging the OEM customers and trying to make sure that we're in sync more with some of how they're thinking should be going to market. Now, are we offering the right value? So it is working kind of the upstream side of it and the downstream side to sync up and just say, hey, are we really putting the most valuable platform together and enabling it, not just for the partners to develop on, but then for our customers to ultimately build a system around it and bring it to market.
Hmm. And how much of, as you're going through those design elements and requirements, certainly you're thinking about the end customer and those use cases and those kinds of things. I imagine you're also thinking about deployment and how some of the capabilities that you're building in affect or could affect partners to make it partner friendly as well. Could you maybe talk a little bit about that aspect as well?
Yeah, so I think it's a work in progress. I think is what I would say is you have certain constraints. Obviously, you can and you can't do, and then you get into confidentiality concerns as well. But it kind of, like I said, it goes back to what we were saying before, where it's what are those most critical things that any partner needs to be successful in developing on your ecosystem or your platform.
Hmm.
You're not going to be able to get everything because there'll be reasons for it. But can you get the basics done? Can you get kind of the core things satisfied to make sure that that they're educated, that they're appropriately enabled? And again, it's can you strike that balance of mutual value proposition? So I'd say it's more of an art than it is a science, to be quite honest, of trying to balance those elements. So I think the recipe will vary too, based on kind of what you said about the go-to-market. So depending upon how you're going to market or what you're going to market with, I think some of that what you unlock and what you offer may vary slightly because you're trying to deliver a certain value proposition. So this may require more of a feature A, but this other thing may require more of a feature B. And how you engage the partner ecosystem in A or B may be different. So maybe you're not going to offer the same things, or you're going to unlock the same things, or if it's inside the company, is breaking down certain walls and going, well, that's really important to go after that feature B to bring it to market. So we have to go change how we're doing some things. So and you can't do that for everything, but if you find something where that's valuable, then you can go champion that and go for it. So it's just kind of that delicate balance as well, and kind of being situationally specific too.
Uh, how do you let's talk a little bit about how you motivate partners then to do that, to sort of go in the direction that you'd like them to go in, and sort of encourage them, put incentives in place to, whether it's take on the new technology or whatever it might be. Talk a little bit about that. Again, of course, there's always, the value for end customers, and what's valuable for end customers is going to be interesting for the partners as well. But are there some times where you're putting incentives in place to, to encourage the right behavior that you're looking for?
Yes, I think high level, there's two things. One is kind of, ease of doing business. So if you want to use the metaphor, removing
Mm.
the sand in the gears, because it can be hard to sometimes work with a large company. So it's like, well, how are we, being agile and being easy to do business with? Because the harder you are, it can be cost. So how do we make ourselves easier to do business with?
Yeah.
And then the second thing is the promise of the payoff. So if I'm a partner, I'm going to invest my time, my resources in an ecosystem, in a platform. Ideally, want it to not be super expensive, easy to do business with, but also if I do make the commitment, how do I know I'm going to get paid? So making sure that and this goes kind of back to the business enablement side of it, is sharing more of those plans and making sure they're clear on what are we trying to do, what is the position, as you were kind of talking about the go to market, what is this platform going to do. So there's kind of expectations. We can make no assurances, but at least what we can do is be clear on our strategy, or be clear on our intentions, or be clear on what we're trying, high level, what are we trying to do here? And how we think there could be value for the partner to be involved in that. Because ultimately, it's got to be financially beneficial. Otherwise, we're not going to have a lot of partnership if people keep jumping in and losing money doing it. So it's got to be something where and also iterative too. And maybe we don't get it right, but we listen. So it's kind of those two things of easier to do business with, which is kind of that partner journey, and making sure we're knocking down those things that they need. And then making sure at the end of the day, that we know there's mutual value, i.e., that they're going to receive financial benefit for developing our platforms and partnering in the go-to-market motion.
That's terrific. That's I think those are really sort of two good elements of that, right? Just making it easy, and trying to solve problems for the partners, and then also, of course, making it financially valuable for everybody. Paul, this has been fantastic. Maybe I'd love to hear, you've been working with partners for many years, learned a lot of things along the way. Any sort of word of advice or suggestions for our audience who are also working with partners, things that you've picked up along the way that, or maybe one piece of advice, one or two pieces of advice that you'd give, or that you I'm sure offer to your team as well as you're coaching them. Some really interesting things that you'd want to share?
Sure. So I'd say three things. I think the first one, it comes down to relationship. At the end of the day, it's the relationship that's going to allow you to do any of the stuff we were talking about. So if you are, aware of, and you're building that relationship with whomever it is, and there's mutual respect. I mean, there's a humility you conduct yourself with, no matter who you are. I think that just goes a long way. Because ultimately it's through people that we get things done. We take these tools, but it's through people. So, and I think that's number one, is relationship. Actually, I should say a genuine relationship, that you're genuinely interested to say, I see the value in working together. I genuinely want to work with you. I genuinely want to. You can have superficial relationships, and that can be good, but then long term, can that really sustain you? So that genuine relationships, I think, is the first one. The second one is really having that culture of listening. And can you really listen for the opportunity? Because a partner or a customer, they will tell you the opportunity, whether maybe not explicitly, but they will tell you what it is. Or you have to be careful enough to navigate and extract that, so you can find what's really bothering them, what is the opportunity. And so kind of back to this solution problem mentality of, well, you have to be willing to, listen for problems, but be willing to come up with a solution. So it's kind of that second thing of listening for that and then taking the action. I think the third thing is being the agent of change, because none of this, is like do the same thing over and over again, especially in the world that we're in right now.
Yeah.
It's a constant set of change. So if you are not a change agent that, change all the change buzzwords, apply them here. If you don't have that change mindset, the innovative mindset of like, you have to redo everything, but can you make some small changes based on what you heard, based on the relationship you formed? That puts you in the best position, I think, to form a lasting partnership.
Yeah. Gosh, I love that. That's really well said and very concise. I love it. Genuine relationship where you really care about the partner, hearing and listening, and sort of actively listening and trying to hear where their challenges are, and then being ready for innovation and change. And just really great advice, Paul, and thank you for sharing those.
Welcome. Appreciate
Yeah.
it.
Well, again, Paul, this has been fantastic. I really appreciate you sharing your time and your thoughts and expertise, and uh, you know, it's just been fantastic. Really appreciate your time today.
Great. Thanks for having me on, Chip. Appreciate it.
Awesome. So, gosh, thank you all for joining us for another episode of Ecosystem Aces. And for Paul Dumke, I'm Chip Rodgers. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, everyone.